Kia ora and welcome to the Niche Cast with myself, Scotty the Slipper, Papatoi Panther, South Auckland Doosra, here with the wildcard of the Wobbly fame. We are here to chat through some Kiwi sporting business, bit of rugby league, bit of football and UFC on the radar. For this episode, we just recorded another episode of the Almost Daily Black Caps podcast just for our patrons. So if you do like a bit of cricket chat or you just want to support the Niche Cache and boost your karma points, support the Niche Cache on Patreon. It is the best way to support the Niche Cache. And otherwise, we also have a bi-weekly email, Mondays and Fridays. That is thenichecache.com.substack.com. And the Patreon is patreon.com/lnichecache, E-L Niche Cache. Always writing about Kiwi sports at theniche-cache.com. Wildcard. I throw it over to you. What is in your garden of mindfulness today?
In the garden of mindfulness, we have a quote that I just stumbled upon on the interwebs recently, and I thought that one is too good not to keep, and well, too good not to plant those seeds in the garden, to keep the metaphor going. It goes that clinging to money is a lack of trust in God. And of course, when we do these mindfulness things, we keep a very sort of an open-minded definition of what you think the word God means. So keep that in mind as well, I suppose. But yeah, clinging to money is a lack of trust in God.
So in keeping with our ideas here, it's a lack of trust in yourself, as well as whatever you perceive God to be. You're lacking the trust in yourself to manifest more money in the future, thus ridding yourself of all your stress.
Yeah, it'll all work out one way or the other. And then you also get a lot of religions which will teach about charity and servitude and things like that, and helping the poor, and hoarding money is keeping money away from people who might need it more from you as well, and not being a generous spirit by sharing sharing that wealth. And I guess you can also think of money as a metaphor too. Like there are other forms of wealth that need sharing, like knowledge and things like that, where holding onto it, keeping it to yourself is selfish, but it's also it's an affront to nature. It's not it's not living in the way that you ought to be living.
Rightio, wildcard. I recently wrote about Phil Gould and just how, because he rejected an approach from the Bulldogs, and I'm not surprised given what I perceive Phil Gould wants to do with rugby league in New Zealand. And I was a bit blown away by his Wikipedia page. And this all comes from Wikipedia, so who knows? But shout out to Wikipedia, because there's a lot of good information on Wikipedia. So he was a good player. Played 10 years. Panthers, Jets, Newtown Jets, Canterbury Bulldogs, and South Sydney. That's fairly stock standard. What isn't stock standard is being selected as the Panthers captain at 20 years of age, and he became the youngest New South Wales premiership captain since Dave Brown led East in the 1930s. So that's kind of ridiculous. Was a bit of a ball-playing middle forward as well, so he's got a bit of pizzazz to his game. And obviously, if you're playing 10 years of rugby league in Sydney between 1976 and 1986, you're probably a tough bugger, as they would say. Then he moves into coaching, though. 1988 to 1989, he is coaching at the Bulldogs, and he wins a premiership. Just a cheeky premiership with the Bulldogs in his first season as Bulldogs coach. Then he goes to Penrith Panthers, and he is coaching there between 1990 to 1994, and the Panthers win a premiership. I believe they won a premiership in 1991. And 2003, of course, but 1991. So Phil Gould coaches the Bulldogs and the Panthers to a premiership during his tenure. Then he goes to South Sydney Sydney City Roosters, He doesn't win a premiership, but he does coach 125 games with a win percentage of 62. So with the Bulldogs, his win percentage was 62. Panthers, his win percentage was 62. And Roosters, his win percentage was 62, which didn't result in a premiership, but plenty of success at the Roosters. I'm just trying to 4 grand finals in 5 years. Then, as the coaching director of the Sydney Roosters, with Ricky Stewart as coach, the Roosters defeat the Warriors in that grand final. New South Wales coaches Phil Gould, 1992 to 1996. Then he comes back 2002 to 2004. Win percentage in state of origin of 58%. Brad Fittler is the only coach since Phil Gould to have a higher win percentage, 60%. Then, of course, he goes back to Penrith Panthers at some point and rebuilds their whole club and lays all the cornerstones for their success that they are now having. He revamped the whole junior system, and what do you have now? You've got a Penrith Panthers team that is at least 80% juniors, local juniors. And that's from the work that Phil Gould has done. This dude is just like, I think there's just this whole perception about him because of his media work, but he is, like, you can make a case just purely on win percentage and premierships that he's one of the best coaches ever. You can also make a case that he's one of the best clubmen ever and how he runs an NRL club. So yeah, it was quite impressive, Wildcard. Just a little bit impressive what Phil Gould has done, regardless of what you see of him on TV, regardless of what you see of him in commentary, however you view Phil Gould, his work in rugby league is undeniable. And to bring it back around to the Warriors, he's working with the Warriors now. And he's helping New Zealand Rugby League. So not only is that fun, but I think it might be the last chapter in his career where he can make another play at just like help in rugby league. Because he's done it. He did a lot of stuff as a player. He won premierships as a coach. He won a premiership as a coaching director at the Roosters, when there probably weren't many coaching directors going round. He's won Origin series as a coach. He rebuilt the Panthers. Like, what more is there for him to do? Let's go help rugby league in New Zealand. That's how I just connect all those dots, and I think he is excited about the prospect of like what he's doing here.
Yeah, that all actually paints a really vivid picture, doesn't it? About like a guy who probably has done basically everything in the game. What do you do after that? Well, you want to do something you haven't done before, right? You want to go into the unknown, like tackle the unmapped territory, which on the way that the NRL is going, you're thinking like either New Zealand or the Polynesian Islands, where like I'm prepping for an article about the NBL basketball season in Australia and how this seems to be the season where the NBL tipped over a sort of a milestone. I don't know what you call it. But they tipped over a point where, they reached a tipping point. There we go. They reached a tipping point which the NRL reached a few years back, where like to be a Kiwi fan of that league doesn't anymore require you to just be a Breakers fan. Like, there are more New Zealand basketball players this past season anyway, combined playing outside of the Breakers than there were playing for the Breakers. And that's just not really been a thing that's been true before. The A-League isn't going to reach this point anytime soon, because New Zealand players in the A-League are considered, unless they're playing for the Phoenix, they're considered as import players. So that's a different kind of, that one's a little bit rigged against. In fact, that's exactly why they weren't able to, well, sort of, it's more complicated than that. And I think this was more just an excuse because they were running late on time, and the Aussie side of it could not be bothered in forcing this through late distance. But that was the official reason given why the Wellington Phoenix couldn't get a women's team up last time, is because they didn't want to have like a whole bunch of Kiwi players registered as locals and changing the rules for that, even though it's exactly the way it is for the Phoenix. So it was always a weak, sort of borderline pathetic excuse, to be honest. But I think it was probably a bit of a like, let's just do this properly next season kind of thing. Because I'm still relatively confident that they'll be able to get a so-called Sheenix team going for the next W League. But yeah, the NBL reached this tipping point that the NRL has reached, several years ago, where there's more Kiwi talent outside of the Warriors than there is at the Warriors. And if you're someone like Phil Gould, who is like the last 3 decades has been a bit of a mastermind at organizational and coaching stuff, and just like generally being a little bit of a Jedi Master at kind of running the sport, like that is one of those opportunities. That is one of those uncharted territory kind of just basically, I don't know, just gigs that he could take up, like an objective he could set himself, something that he could look at and see, well, I've done this, I've done that. What else might need my help? Well, the Warriors clearly are a very good team for, many years, that add a lot to this, add a very good franchise for many years, to be specific on that, who add a lot to the competition, but who haven't had the success on the field that they should have. And when they have, like a couple grand finals, it's not been sustained, and they haven't been able to like back that up year after year in the way that the Roosters or the Storm do, or potentially that the Panthers are going to for the next 5 to 10 years. Like, it's an opportunity for him to do something like that. And I think when you're at the stage of your career as someone like Phil Gould is, and there are plenty of examples of someone like this in other sports as well, of I can think this isn't a good example, but Phil Jackson is a similar one who tried to do something like this with the New York Knicks, and turns out he just wasn't really cut out for the backroom stuff. Phil Gould, on the other hand, has done a lot of this before. He did he did mastermind the revamp for the Panthers, so it's not at all out of his wheelhouse. But when you're at that stage of your career, you're not so much looking for like guaranteed successes or whatever. You're looking a little bit more for challenges and things you can like say like legacy building, or legacy, the legacy's built, but adding to something that can add to the legacy, something that hasn't been done. And yeah, getting the Warriors to be this like slick, professional, sustained, successful franchise is as good a challenge as any. I can see why he not only took the job in the first place, but why he seems to be as committed and as excited about what he's building and what the people he's working with are building as he could be, really.
The Warriors face the Storm. I just saw that Christian Welch is out, and who knows who's going to play for the Storm. All you need to know is that Jesse Bromwich, Brandon Smith, Asafa Solomona, Jerome Hughes, they're playing nearly every game. So they might be and Kenny Bromwich has missed a few games, but shout out to him as well. So they might be why the Storm are also good, not just the State of Origin players. These games for the Warriors, who knows how this is going to play out? I've got no idea. No Reece Walsh for the Warriors. Could be a game that the Warriors get up for and upset the Storm. Who knows? We'll just wait and see. Fun times. The Warriors have also signed Aaron Penne, who is on the bench for the Storm in this game. Easy signing. He wouldn't be overly expensive, and he's a big mobile forward who must have Storm values. So right now, The Warriors, they are signing big mobile forwards. And it's worked. And it's like a good strategy. None of these dudes are overly expensive. O'Sullivan is like scouting them from reserve grade and minimal NRL time. And he's like Jermaine Tanoa-Brown just went straight from reserve grade in Queensland to the Warriors starting side. That's good recruitment. Not expensive, contributing to the team. Jack Murchie wasn't getting a whole lot of game time with the Raiders. Comes to the Warriors, you're doing a job. Bailey Sirinen, only a few games into his career. Impressed in the NRL, boom, the Warriors come get him. So I'm liking those moves, and Aaron Penny just feels like one of those moves. I heard two things from Cameron George when he was on the Triple M, I think it was the Sunday show. He said to stay tuned about a possible game in New Zealand, which was then officially announced that they will be returning for a game at Mount Smart Stadium. He also specifically mentioned Rocco Berry as an exciting talent. And I have liked what I've seen from Rocco Berry. He seems to be a very good tackler in the NRL. Long body, good footwork, just good skills, natural footy player. And on top of that, in reserve grade, where he's been playing for Redcliffe Dolphins, he's played 3 games. He has scored 4 tries. He has 2 try assists, 7 tackle breaks, and 5 line breaks. So he is playing pretty well in reserve grade for the Redcliffe Dolphins, and 52 tackles made, 3 tackles missed, efficiency 87.9, so he's doing a job defensively at centre as well. So I just throw that out there because the first thing Cameron George said definitely was manifested. And the other thing he said, I am curious to see if it does. I think it will do, and I'm pretty... That helps you understand why the Warriors let Hayes Perham go, why they have let Paul Turner go, and just a good footy player. The Warriors are signing good footy players, and I think they are also promoting good footy players from within as well.
There we go. Rocco Berry's the one whose dad was an All Black, who I did a thing on the Variety Show a few weeks back about.
Yes, definitely Marty Berry. Kyle Jamieson was once an opening batsman, and Rocco Berry's dad used to play for the All Blacks. Same cut of cloth there.
And Jacob Roram was a goalkeeper.
Shout out Adam Milne as well, footy player.
Yeah, Chatham Cup winner. With I think it was, who was it now? Was it the mighty Wairarapa, or was it something like that? I forget. I had a tweet about that a little while back while he was playing the bloody 2020s. Well, that's a wild one. Like, there's a lot of those. Like, I know Nathan McCullum used to be a very good striker when playing in the Dunedin leagues. I've actually played football against him. He fouled me once, the bastard. He jumped over the back of me for a throw and got an elbow in the back of the thing, and I don't believe I even got the free kick. I should have from memory, but there's a few of those like multi-sport ones, but Adam Milne actually winning a Chatham Cup is bonkers.
Definitely is bonkers, and I think he's going to be playing in the T20 Blast as well, so we'll be catching up with him as he goes on that journey. He's pretty much just a T20 bowler these days. Wildcat, I was watching Chile versus Bolivia in football yesterday. 1-1 draw, Chile were dominating the game, scored a goal to go up 1-0, conceded a penalty, Bolivia hung in there, so that was pretty cool. But it was from that I started thinking about I'm watching international football. You've got some Euro football happening as well. No New Zealand games though. I was like, damn, there's 2 things that need to happen. We need to have New Zealand football teams playing football and New Zealand rugby league teams playing rugby league. And any other national team that hasn't played many games in a long time either, because like it's just sad. You just want to see you want to see them playing, you want to see them in action. But this is I bring that up because I guess it's just that time of year where the domestic competition's quieting down and international football takes precedence, but there's still in pockets of the world, there's still club footy going on. So we've got Kiwis playing in the USA, you've got Ali Riley with Orlando, Abby Erceg with North Carolina, Katie Bowen with Kansas City, and then you've got a lot of Scandinavian action as well. These are all women, so the women's football is trucking along. Betsy Hassett is playing in Iceland. CJ Bott is playing in Norway. Vic Esson is playing in Norway. Greg Draper, who you mentioned in the variety show, he's been busy as well. And then you just got some transfer news in your Flying Kiwis to cap it all off. What is interesting you the most about this current little window where there is international football happening? It's a bummer there's no New Zealand international football happening, but we still have Flying Kiwis doing things in obscure pockets of the footballing world. What are some of your highlights from the past week or so?
Yeah, this is the funkiest, well, I won't say the funkiest because it's probably a little more funky when you've got Chris Wood scoring hat-tricks in the Premier League sort of thing. But this is one of those, it's a sneaky time in the Flying Kiwis desk. It's like the big European leagues and even the small European leagues are mostly finished right now. And in Europe, everyone's gearing up for the Euros, so it's international football this, international football that. The South African League, for example, where there's been a few Kiwis lately, a couple less next year than there will have been, because Dan Morgan is leaving his club there and hoping to get another club in South Africa. Maya Bevan has left the club he was at and basically not playing for at all. And Andre De Jong actually got a game in the last game. His team had finished quite incredibly, second. They were battling relegation a year ago. He's made just his second appearance of the season because there was a nothing on the line kind of game. Still expected to get released at the end of the season, so I think the South African beat might be winding down a little bit, but hopefully a couple of these guys land on their feet. So it's mostly right now, it's mostly just America and Scandinavia, because these are leagues that run year on year rather than the sort of 2020-21 type season thing where you cross over the new year in the middle. These are leagues because I guess definitely in Scandinavia it's weather based. You can't be playing in the middle of winter because it's just impossible. So they run a different type of season, and right now because of that, different calendar of season, because of that, that means right now when other sort of it's just fun because you get to I'm getting to cover people who wouldn't necessarily make the cut every other week because there's just a lot of competition for places now more than ever. But yeah, we're getting more of a focus right now and on some of the American stuff. And you mentioned Rosie White didn't play last week, so she wasn't in Flying Kiwis, but she is also the fourth New Zealander in the NWSL right now. And I looked up to see what the cut of international players is in a competition like that, and obviously it's overwhelmingly American players, but New Zealanders are actually, I think, the fourth most represented country. It's Canada, no surprises there, have about 17 players or something. I think Japan have 5 and New Zealand have 4, but New Zealand's players, because Bowen, Erceg and Riley pretty much starting every week for their team. So they're actually playing a lot more minutes than the Japanese players that are in the thing are. So it's New Zealand is even higher up on that list if you only go by minutes played. MLS was on a international break because the American men's team were playing games, and in fact I think they were playing this morning again, so they've been playing. That means there wasn't any Michael Boxall or Bill Tuiloma or Elliot Collier, but those three are also definitely Boxall plays every game. Tuiloma's sort of like an alternate defender, we'll see, because there is a little bit of a break. I don't think they come back for another week or two still in the MLS, but hopefully we'll see if Bill Tuiloma's done enough, because one of the other centre-backs was injured, so he was getting a decent little run of games there, and hopefully he's done enough to keep that starting spot, but we'll see how that goes. Elliot Collier basically comes off the bench for Chicago most games, will play 20-odd minutes, and sometime eventually he's going to score a great goal, but we're waiting on that one for a little while. That's not like... Those aren't obscure kind of flying Kiwis, but they're the kind of ones that maybe would get overshadowed by Kakache, Singh, Wood, etc., etc. Percival as well. Like, so it's kind of cool that scene gets their little sort of spotlight for the next couple months. But I'm also hoping, you did mention transfer stuff, I'm also hoping that there's a fair bit of that, and there are quite a few. Maybe not an overwhelming amount, but there are, a decent number of players who, because it was the end of the European season or the end of that calendar season, like there are a number of players who will be looking for other clubs, and there are, to wrap this back around to international football, there are Olympics coming up, and there are a few players who will be trying to put themselves in the shop window when said Olympics come around. I'm thinking of Aaron Naylor as much as anyone, who's a free agent after barely being able to get a game at all for Reading in the last season over in England. So, like, there's quite a few players as well who, this all wraps up nicely in a way, but quite a few players who will be looking to use the Olympics as a platform to get themselves better club deals, to then, of course, because this is the priority, to then put themselves headlining Flying Kiwis at some point in the near future. Like, it all kind of wraps up nicely in a nice little bundle there. I am quite excited about watching a lot of this international football. I haven't seen a lot of the South American stuff yet, but it's on at nice times of the day, so I'm going to try to. And of course, the Euros are starting this weekend as well, which will also be very fun. But as far as Kiwi international football goes, it's definitely the Olympics that are the major focus. And we're still a month and 5 or 6 weeks away from that one starting. Still awaiting squads. I wouldn't imagine it would be too much long before we start to get those, but I'm toying up with the idea of, like, do I write a preview, or is the squad just going to come out in the next couple of days and it'll spoil that article, and I just need to wait till it's announced and then write a reaction piece to the actual squad, or trying to toss up how to attack this. But suffice to say that the Olympics should be a rare and exciting opportunity for both All Whites and Football Ferns international footy, because it's not a full All White squad, it's an under-24 squad, but it is going to be a lot of overlap with what a full All White squad would be. Danny Hay is coaching as well. A lot of young players at the moment who are commanding positions for the All Whites, and anyway, the All Whites never play anyway, so we don't even really have too deep of a reference point there. This is the best that we've had for a year and a half or whatever. So, those are definitely exciting times. This is definitely a take what we can get opportunity for international football, and then couple that with a more boutique period of Flying Kiwis coverage as well. And it's not the major busy period for the Kiwi football, but it is a nice little kind of hipster window, I suppose.
It's a year-round excursion on the Flying Kiwis beat, and it's always takes you to interesting corners of the globe. We also have UFC 263, which has Israel Adesanya fighting Marvin Vettori, and Brad Riddell fighting Drew Dober. Israel Adesanya is the champion of the middleweight division. He has already fought Marvin Vettori. And it's a bit strange because Robert Whittaker's 3 wins after losing to Adesanya, they were all against top 10 ranked opponents. Marvin Vettori has had 5 wins since Adesanya, and only one of them is a top 10 fighter with the rankings as they are now. So Robert Whittaker he should probably deserve it, but he's out injured at the moment and had it's more a quick turnaround from a hefty fight that he had in April. So Adesanya's fighting Vettori, defeated him last time, striking clinic. Marvin Vettori is a bit of a wrestler, so he can wrestle as well, and in losing to Jan Blachowicz earlier this year, Adesanya did show that if you are a bigger dude and you get him in the middle of the octagon, you can take him down and then control the fight that way. Whereas Adesanya prefers to stand up and control the fight with his striking. I suspect Adesanya will just be way too good with his striking, but Vettori does present a niggly little challenge. They don't like each other either, which usually helps. It's a fight Adesanya should win, but it's also quite a risky fight because if he loses, it's gonna. If he loses, he's lost 2 fights in a row, and the first was completely all good. Second is, why are you losing to Vettori? And then Robert Whittaker will probably get the fight against Vettori, so it'll put Adesanya down a bit. But I am predicting he will be too classy with his striking, adequate takedown defense to get the win against Marvin Vettori. Got any Adesanya thoughts, Wildcard?
Not really. I was just waiting for you to break it down for me, and you've done a fine old job of that. So he is because he had to step up to light heavyweight, whatever it was, the next division up. Copped an L in that one, returning to middleweight, where he obviously, being as this is a different division, still retains his title. So you're saying he is expected to. When we say expected to win, what are we talking about there? Are we talking about it would be a shock if he doesn't? Or are we talking about one of those, the slight edge kind of thing in a close fight?
Their last fight, which was back in 2018, but when they did fight, it was kind of close because Vettori did grab some takedowns. So he landed 2 of 6 takedowns, and they both happened in the final round. So Adesanya outstruck Vettori in the first 2 rounds and defended some takedowns and was winning both of those rounds. And then Vettori landed some takedowns and got some control time in the final round, which always throws a bit of a spanner in the works. If you can get that last round takedown, it definitely helps score some points and sway the judges. But Adesanya was just too crisp with his striking. So the striking then was 46% versus 29%. And a different way of thinking about that is Adesanya landed more strikes, 57 to 46, from fewer total strikes, 123 to 154. So that kind of tells you the story of what was happening standing up. It did end up a lot closer than it probably should have, just because Vettori did get those takedowns, and Vettori will definitely be eager to take Adesanya down. Vettori will think, oh, he got taken down by Jan Blachowicz in that last fight. I'm big and chunky like Jan Blachowicz. I can take Adesanya down and control the fight that way. So kind of a quintessential city kickboxing matchup where striking and takedown defense is the recipe for success, kind of as usual.
It's funny hearing someone named Vettori talked about who isn't a left arm spinner. I'm so used to a single context for the name Vettori, but so it goes. And is the transition back down the division expected to be something that Adesanya has to overcome, or is it sort of just routine? He knows what he's doing, no dramas kind of thing.
Yeah, he is still a lot taller than Vettori. He's 6'4". Vettori is 6 foot. He's got a longer reach, so that's going to be an advantage. And they're the same weight, obviously, because they're in the same weight class. So, they will both. What usually happens is you weigh in, you cut all the weight to weigh in, and then you've got 24 hours to revitalize your body. And fighters often look very different from when they weigh in to when they step in the octagon. So Adesanya is still a big, muscly dude when he's in the octagon fighting, and I suspect Vettori will be trying to resemble Jan Blachowicz as much as possible there for sure. Definitely not as cool as Daniel Vettori. So fuck Marvin Vettori. Brad Riddell versus Drew Dober.
He doesn't fight in glasses, you're saying?
No, he doesn't. That wouldn't work out too well if he did, because they would be broken quickly by Adesanya. Brad Riddell versus Drew Dober. They are very similar fighters statistically, which is a bummer because Brad Riddell's fight he was meant to have earlier this year was against a wrestler, so that would have been a great stylistic matchup, whereas this one is just two strikers who are going to fuck each other up pretty much. Brad Riddell, who knows? Like, it's just one of those fights where you just got to wait and see what Brad Riddell wants to do. Everything's the same. Similar height, similar reach, similar striking output, similar. They do dabble in a few takedowns. Brad Riddell has outstruck all of his opponents in the UFC, and he's also landed a takedown in all three fights as well. So he can mix up a bit of everything. And he is showing a rather ruthless ability to want to scrap, which is always handy in the UFC. Like, if you just want to get a bit animalistic, Brad Riddell can do that as well. And Brad Riddell's on the rise, so definitely a win here for Brad Riddell, I think, will be more impactful than a win for Adesanya. If Adesanya wins, he is kind of setting up the rematch against Whittaker, which is going to be huge for UFC in this part of the world. The last time they fought is still the biggest crowd ever in UFC history, 57,000 I think, and the second biggest crowd was a Ronda Rousey fight in Melbourne as well. So two of the biggest crowds ever for the UFC have been in Melbourne, which just shows what the popularity down under. But if he wins, he just keeps trucking along, he fights the next contender, it'll be a big fight. But as far as changing their circumstance, if Brad Riddell wins, he is going to become a ranked fighter. He is going to be right there among the best lightweights in the world, and Dan Hooker's a lightweight. So if Brad Riddell continues to win fights, within maybe, I'd give it a year, there will be an intersection of Brad Riddell and Dan Hooker, which will probably just play out where they don't want to fight each other, but it'll be an intersection where that stuff becomes a factor, because that will mean Dan Hooker's just kept his place at the top of the division, fighting for contender spots, but Brad Riddell has risen into that mix as well, so it'll be a glorious time.
Outstanding. There we go. I didn't even realize that what you're saying about the crowds in Melbourne, that's nuts. Which I was looking at A-League crowds recently, because I was looking at how the Phoenix had the two biggest ones of the most recent season, which is also crazy, arguably even crazier considering the history of Wellington Phoenix's reputation and crowd numbers and all this kind of thing. But normally Melbourne is where you get enormous, one of the reasons that the Phoenix were able to get the biggest two crowds of the season is because Melbourne Victory have sucked recently. They had an absolutely terrible season. And when Victory are absolutely terrible, people will no longer turn up to watch what's usually the best supported, in terms of numbers, club in the A-League, which is what I was checking up. But Melbourne also, of course, you get the biggest crowds in cricket outside of India, at least at the MCG, and you get just in general, you get Aussie Open and tennis, and always plenty of people there. It's a place where they know how to get down to sporting events, that's for sure. And I would imagine, given the way that rematches normally go in combat sports, I would imagine a rematch between Whittaker and Adesanya would probably be pushing to beat that if that comes to pass down the line.
Yeah, and that's what made it a bit. The UFC, I think they're missing the boat a bit, because but it all depends on what Whittaker wants to do. He's someone who likes to take a bit of time and between his fights, and that basically took him out of the Adesanya mix, so that just wasn't going to work. But the UFC also, because Adesanya he's obviously African, and the UFC has 3 African champs, which is completely true and fair. Kamaru Usman is African American. Francis Ngannou, came up through France, I think, and Adesanya came up through New Zealand. So they definitely also have African champions, and so they're playing up the African angle to develop Africa as a UFC market. So that is the only thing working against Adesanya having a title fight in New Zealand, which would be, everyone knows it would be amazing. I think he's mentioned Eden Park, I saw in a headline. And yeah, you could definitely do that. The Melbourne thing, a lot of people travel to Melbourne. So if you're from New Zealand and you want to see Adesanya fight, well, yeah, it's an easy trip to Melbourne, make a weekend of it, that's cool. But Adesanya hosting a title fight in New Zealand would be pretty epic. But at the same time, the UFC definitely wants to go to Africa, and maybe that happens sooner than Adesanya defending his title in New Zealand. If he is to fight Whittaker, I think he holds the leverage in that situation. So they're not going to take a Whittaker fight to Africa. And Adesanya went to Australia to fight Whittaker, who was the champion. So now Adesanya has the leverage, so he will probably say, let's do it in Auckland, bada bing, bada boom.
Do you get are there a lot of UFC sort of major events that are held overseas? Because it does seem to be, as far as the fighters go, it's completely global. And as far as the fan base goes, it's completely global. But the organization of it does always string as, it always seems very, very American. And there's a fair few sports that fall, and I think the NBA is one that falls very closely into that. It's a little bit different because that is a franchise-based league where the franchises are based, it's an American competition. It's not sort of an individual sport thing where people can just come from all over. But there are, more international players in the NBA now than ever. The UFC could go way further than the NBA does because you're not sort of bound by geography in the same way. But is that do you get, how often do they have major fights in Europe, for example? Because some of so many of the very top fighters are from various European countries as well, and it does, from what you're saying, it sounds like they are trying to sort of nurture the African market, which reminds me of Muhammad Ali fighting Joe Frazier in Africa in mid-70s, and it's been done. It's been done successfully. It's certainly something that is it could be a lucrative option. I wonder, how much, well, just throw it back on the original question, how much do they sort of spread the big major events around the world?
They do, obviously not since the start of 2020, but they do. Conor McGregor on his rise, he had a fight in Ireland. They have fights around Europe. The Africa thing will require some logistical matters to be sorted out, and of course you can't predict who's going to be the champion in a year's time or 2 years' time. They always change, so that's tricky. But they do definitely take fights around the world. They've fought in Australia many times. They have fought in New Zealand a few times as well. They definitely have a traveling roadshow circus vibe that they can roll out. And that flexibility is really handy because as soon as you get a champion or a contender from one section of the world, you can tap into that. As soon as you get a bit of a wave like City Kickboxing or when the Brazilians really started to take over back in the day, or Conor McGregor as well, as soon as you get those fighters as individuals or teams or a wave, you can tap into that market straight away and go have events there. So, yeah, they definitely share around the world their show. The spanner in the works, and the spanner in the works in a lot of sports, is the money from the Middle East. So, because what happens is if there's an event in Auckland, you'll have some, the Auckland Council or Tourism Board will pay money to host that fight, and that's what happens with Melbourne. It's what happens, with New Zealand tourism for the America's Cup. That's how those things happen. So in the Middle East, you just have royal families who are dropping multi-millions of dollars or billions of dollars maybe for the whole Fight Island situation. So I don't know, but that's kind of forecasting to what happens when the world opens up again and how those factors play a part. But to answer your question, yeah, they definitely share it around, and it's being that flexible, I think, is so beneficial, because as soon as something changes, you can put more fights in that market and benefit from it.
It's probably been a bit of the key to the success of the sport and this rapid rise that it has had, is that I guess there's two sides of that coin. Is that they have been able to spread it out, but also just that that there's so many top fighters from just disparate parts of the world. Like you mentioned, Brazilians, and there's the Irishmen. You've got the Russian dudes and the Eastern Europeans, and you've got an African wave at the moment, Australasia, obviously America, and surrounding countries there. And it's a little bit crazy when you think about just how quickly that the sport took root in so many places around the world.
We don't need to go deep into this rabbit hole, but I was thinking maybe a comparison would be in cricket. As soon as you see, cricket's gaining popularity in Afghanistan, cricket's gaining popularity in Netherlands, cricket is gaining popularity in the whatever underdeveloped market, that's when you hit it. That's when you go there to play a series. And I don't know if I'm speaking from an ICC perspective, where as soon as you get a hot pocket in the world that is enjoying cricket, you get them involved, or maybe from a national perspective, whether it's the big three, the mafia, as I referred to them, or a nation like New Zealand. If New Zealand tapped into the Dutch team and played games against them, or toured Afghanistan, or invited Afghanistan or Netherlands to tour New Zealand, let alone any other nation, I think that would be a massive boost for New Zealand, beneficial to New Zealand, let alone those other nations. But then you're presenting Afghanistan or Netherlands in this example with direct access to New Zealand cricketers. So suddenly those fans are interested in what New Zealand's doing, and they're engaged in what New Zealand's doing, because New Zealand is the nation that invited us to tour regularly when no one else wanted to. That's the relationship we now have, and no one's really willing to do that, so no one gets to benefit from it,
Yeah, instead it's a case of these other sort of a couple of these tier 2 nations are getting kind of decent. We're getting these little, as you say, these hot pockets of interest around the world in the sport. Let's shrink the World Cup. Let's make the World Cup smaller and only have the test playing nations in it instead. And I noticed there was a thing a week or two ago where they've announced that the World Cup's going back up to 14 teams or something like that. And it was one of them Cricinfo push notifications, and obviously one of those sort of positive press releases. Look how the ICC is growing the game, and the first thing I think of is well, they shrunk it in the first place. You don't get praise for undoing your mistake. You just don't make the mistake in the first place, and then you're sorted.
Yes, definitely. But we'll let's just nip that one in the bud right there, or else we will be here for another week or so. Keep an eye out for more almost daily Patreon podcasts revolving around the Black Caps. We'll be doing a couple of those. Second test is starting Thursday evening. And we will be back for the variety show early next week. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Cheer to the cheer.